Hey guys, Bob Flounders, Max Ralph here on a Monday. Nice weather, not too hot, not too cold. It is September 8th. Penn State is 2 games, guys, into their season. They're 2-0. They play FCS Villanova this week to conclude that serious non-conference schedule of theirs, and then they're going to be on the bye week, Max, which I think is also interesting. And then finally, what Penn State fans are kind of really looking forward to is they close out September with a whiteout game against Oregon, which looks very, very good early. That is going to be quite a game. But, Max, we were up at Beaver Stadium after they beat Florida International. You look at the final score, it's 34-0. It never really felt like it was a 34-0 game. It was 10-0 at half. They extended their lead to 20-0, and then they piled on some scores, I think, a little bit later. It felt like, I think a lot of Penn State fans are a little rankled about the offense. They're definitely rankled about how Drew Allar played in that game. It just felt like they kind of gummed this team to death. It wasn't really surgical. The defense was never really going to be challenged too much, although I thought FIU played about as well as they could. They played aggressively. They played to win. Kudos to them. They were not intimidated, but really James talked a lot during his Monday presser about the offense, from all angles. He was asked about Drew. He was asked about the running backs, asked about the offensive line. He gave some pretty detailed responses. He addressed the expectations surrounding the team. He was asked a question by Mike Gross just about how the players kind of think where they are after 2 games. I think James really appreciated that question because it was a thoughtful one and it gave him a chance to elaborate on some things. But as we sit here, Max, I'm going to stop rambling. Where do you want to start? I know we talked about it off air. It's going to be mostly about the offense. Where do you want to start this podcast?
Yeah, I think. Well, I just kind of want to wrap up my thoughts on FIU in the game. Yeah. You laid it out perfectly. It wasn't surgical. It was comfortable by the end of it, but it was not. It did not feel that way. I was really impressed by Willie Simmons. I thought that their game plan from the coaching staff was fantastic. Also impressed that FIU, like the decisions they made on 4th downs and everything. I thought that FIU team gave Penn State as much of a run as it possibly could have, like you said. And I think when it's all said and done, that's probably one of the better teams in the Conference USA this year. Willie Simmons, kind of a rising star maybe at head coach. We'll see. He did really good things at Florida A&M as well. So just wanted to say that. But even with that point made, Penn State did not look as good as we'd hoped, as we'd expect. And it starts with the offense. You talked about, I think it starts with Drew Allar as we kind of got to dive in a little bit more on the performance today with James Franklin. Credit to Mark Wogenrich for getting to the question first. Drew, after the game, said that he was kind of overthinking things in the middle of play. And I think that was pretty obvious. I think you can see it because there was it was the 4th down play. It was the 3rd or 4th down early in the game. And he's got Nick Singleton wide open on a swing route that will easily get the 1st down and maybe more. Mm-hmm. And he just misses it. He just misses it wide left of where he wanted it. And that's just not something Drew Allar does often. Have whatever criticism you want of him as a quarterback. Those are throws that he has made. That's a throw that somebody could probably walk off of their couch and make. I mean, if we're being honest, it's just that's not something you're used to seeing from him. So I definitely think you get to the point where Penn State's offense isn't as explosive, isn't as good in the first 2 weeks as we'd anticipated. And I think it started to get to Drew Allar. So I'm very curious, Bob, your analysis of what James Franklin said there and kind of how you think it can get righted against Villanova this week.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about Drew, and I'll say this: like, if you just want to talk in terms of talent, like he really is a 5-star talent. Thrown into a starting role very early in his Penn State career, groomed to be the starter almost from the time he got here behind Sean Clifford. Starts as a second-year sophomore. It's gonna be a bumpy ride your first year as a starting quarterback when you're that young. But the improvement's been there. When I think about Drew, though, I think about where he's at now, and he is, firmly in the first round discussion. Expectations just keep rising with him, and you have the mental side of playing quarterback. It's great to have the physical tools. Penn State, during my time covering the team, has had some guys that have been some really skilled players, but not all of them have really fulfilled their promise. And a lot of it has to do, I think, with what's between the ears. It's the mental approach. You got to be mentally tough. And when I think about Drew, one of the things I think about, Max, is when you were covering him during your collegiate days, I just think from a very young age, he was kind of, led in the direction, well, you don't want to make too many mistakes. You remember they'd always bring up the touchdown to interception ratio. And I think to begin his career, he went the most passes in FBS history without throwing an interception.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes that works against you a little bit because you're thinking about that. Hey, I don't want to do that. And I also think that as his career has progressed, early in a game whether Drew is locked in or not. Like he's been a streaky player. You think about the Oregon game last year. He made some mistakes, right? But he was able to right the ship, and he played some of the best football I've seen him play, for a long stretch and leading that team back into a game that we thought was going to be a blowout, early in the second quarter. But then, late in the game, I think he threw that pass to Harrison Wallace that was essentially a jump ball that they intercepted, and the game that was the game, right? Mm-hmm. I never really know what's coming next with Drew. He is such a streaky player, and I think he's an intelligent kid. I think if you're Drew, you never really know, if everything's not perfect, you never really know when the cold Drew is going to show up and when he's going to get hot. Because when Drew's hot, he's as good as any quarterback in college football. But mm-hmm. when he's cold, I think he presses a lot, and I do think that definitely showed up against this Florida international team, and it showed up on third down, which is something James talked about. They were just really not great on third down. It wasn't all Drew's fault, but a lot of it was. And at this stage, Max, in his fourth year, with what Penn State has done to upgrade his weapons, at wideout. They don't have Tyler Warren. They have two really good running backs. One of them is also pressing. And they have an offensive line. So I just don't know. This team, if it plays tight against Oregon, it's not going to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. Just to kind of continue on Drew, James Franklin said what we were all thinking. He missed throws that he usually makes. And that's just plain and simple. That can't happen. And the thing that he kind of continued with is we've heard this a lot, but it's the next play mentality. Sometimes you hear guys call it the 6-second mentality. That's really hard to do. But that's the bottom line. And it seems like some things lingered for Drew on Saturday. He missed a couple throws and it snowballed. You can't have that happen. Now, I will say in his defense, James Franklin graded out 5 drops for receivers in that game. Yeah. His numbers look a lot different if that doesn't happen, if those guys are able to make a man miss after the catch. But even still, I think you could probably say a few of those drops were also because they weren't as good of throws as Drew Allar probably should have made them. But a great point, Bob. The being afraid of making mistakes, I think that was such a huge piece of why the Mike Yurcich experiment never worked out, because the way they taught Drew Allar from a young age just was not getting it done. It wasn't who he's supposed to be. You want a gunslinger back there. You want a guy. Especially if you look at a lot of these NFL quarterbacks these days and in history who have been, the best at their position. They make turnovers. It happens. You're not looking at a Josh Allen who just won the MVP and saying, "Oh my God, he threw 3 interceptions." It has happened before, and guess what? They've still won those games at times. It's just that's more who you want Drew Allar to be. I think, like you said, he is streaky. You can tell when he's locked in, but every time that he's had his best games, it's been when his back is against the wall. When Oregon, when they get down big like that, and it's it's go for broke. It doesn't matter if I'm making an interception anymore. I have to make this throw. He played really well in the second half of that Oregon game. Yeah. USC, he came back against the wall. I have to lead this drive. He made really good throws in the fourth quarter and overtime. If you go even back to Indiana in 2023, he made a great throw to KLS to win the game. And he even said, actually, Bob, I don't know if you remember this or if you were with him that day, but I remember vividly in that Indiana game, that was when he threw his first career interception.
Yeah,
Was
that's
in that
right.
Indiana game. And he said after the game, after I threw that interception, something changed or something clicked. And I think that was kind of the clearest evidence, even though nobody outright said it, that was the clearest evidence that Drew Allar has always been asked to be a little too perfect, and it's caused some problems for him. And so I think if Penn State can find a way, if Andy Kotelnicki, James Franklin can find a way to make him play loose, that's when he's at his best. Because you're right, when he's at that, he's one of, if not the best quarterback in the country. And that's a lot on Drew. But Bob, you also kind of alluded to there might be some other players on the offense that are feeling this way too.
Yeah. I also wonder. So we've talked about this. So James is, and he talked about it in the press conference. James is much more comfortable in this day and age with the team he has and with the defense he has of going for it on fourth down. And I don't. So back to Drew. I don't know that fourth down is necessary. Like, he had to make a couple of fourth down throws against USC, or else they lose that game. But in that first quarter, that first fourth down, 4th and 4, I think it was. There was somebody broke wide open down the field on the left hand side. I don't know if it was on Drew or it was on the receiver, but on the play-by-play sheet, it was Pena was the intended receiver. I thought I saw Hudson down there too.
Yep.
They didn't connect there. The next drive, Max, he had Devontae Ross. If he hit him in stride, it would have been like an 80-yard touchdown. It was underthrown. They got the pass interference call that was a 15-yard penalty. But it just seems to me like the tone was set for Drew early in this game, and he was unable. He was never really quite able to right the ship, and it was really more about Penn State just wearing down this Florida International team. Even the touchdown pass to Devontae Ross there in the third quarter, it was really more about Devontae than it was about Drew's throw. And I just wonder what's going on inside his head sometimes, because he talked about, just flushing it, but I just don't know that when he starts bad, it's that easy for him to flush things. And I wonder, as this season plays out, if he can get better at that, or he can start faster, because when it shows up against a good team, last year against Notre Dame, even the Ohio State game at Beaver Stadium, now those are two tremendous defenses, and they made a lot of quarterbacks look bad. Yeah. But I just wonder, are we going to be at some point this year? Are we going to be able to see Drew in one of the games that really matters? If it's a slow start, is he going to be able to flush it and play like a really good final 30 minutes? That, to me, that's going to come up again, and we're going to find out a lot more about Drew in the 4 or 5 games Penn State's going to play that they're going to have to win.
Yeah, I will say, Bob, and I think James Franklin actually alluded to this, and maybe a few other people might have looked over it a little bit in postgame on Saturday. But he did say in these first 2 weeks so far, they've had specific things, whether it's a scheme, whether it's running the ball, throwing the ball. They've had specific things that they've been trying to get done each week against these opponents. And I think that makes sense to me, because it's a game that you think you should win by a lot and should not struggle with in any way. Yeah. It makes sense to work on things that you want to see cleaned up. Like, I know going into week 1, he said, we really want to see these transfer receivers and develop chemistry with Drew. That happened in week 1. I don't know what the emphasis was specifically in week 2. It was probably running the ball. And he also mentioned that rotating in a lot of guys against lesser competition could change some things with the chemistry. I wonder if maybe on Saturday against Villanova, the poor Wildcats coming from FCS, if that might all just go out the window and we say, we've got this installed, let's get some confidence and play our best ball going into Oregon. I don't know, but if you're pointed in what you're trying to get done, sometimes it's not always as clean as it should be. Yeah. Maybe that contributes to Drew Allar thinking a little bit too much. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, because like again, the bottom line is he can and needs to be better, but I'm just adding a little bit of what maybe was going on.
Yeah, Max, you know what I think was a priority? You know what I think has been a priority the first 2 games, but it definitely stood out to me against FIU. I think James is trying to get his offense comfortable in fourth down situations. I
Yeah.
think he wants with this offensive line, with this running back, with these running backs, and with this quarterback, and now with these wideouts. I
Mhm.
think that if it's 4th and 2 or 4th and 3, and they're anywhere from the 50-yard line and in, I think he's looking at it as a 4-down offense, and I think the more they practice trying to execute in game situations on 4th down, if they get better at it, I just think you're going to see this continue to play out as the season gets more serious, because I do think there's going to be some games that they're going to be in toss-up situations, and James wants to play to win. He played to win late in the Notre Dame game in the Orange Bowl on that possession that ended up in Drew's interception. They could have played for overtime. He wanted to take a shot. I think he believes in his team, and I think 4th down is a big down to James, and I think that's what they've been doing against lesser opponents, because I think if they can start to click, you're going to see a lot more of it in Big Ten play.
Yeah, just like week 1, I'm pumping the brakes a little bit on hitting the panic button.
Yeah.
It happening 2 weeks in a row, not finishing drives. I mean, Penn State really moved the ball pretty well between the 30s. I'd say that was kind of the feel we got on game day. Moved the ball pretty well and just couldn't finish drives. It's like the panic meter is increasing a little bit, but I'm not all the way there yet, just because I still feel that you're gonna hold some things back for Oregon. And one of the big keys, Bob, that I know that you've been all over, is the offensive line did look quite a bit better in week 2 against FIU. And James Franklin pointed that out a lot today and said multiple times they were a lot more physical this week. And I think that made a difference.
Yeah, and I don't think he was lying. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't think he was lying, but it occurred to me, and I think the fans, what they have to realize is when you go all in and you bring back all this veteran talent, you want the veteran talent to be on the field for the big games. And I want to say that they kind of took it easy with with the players that they knew they could count on in the off season. You don't need to see a lot of them doing physical things in spring. You don't need to see them getting hurt in August. And I do think the first couple of games in some positions where you need cohesiveness, like the offensive line, as opposed to maybe the defensive line where you can just kind of get after it. You need to be synced up. You need to be on the same page. It's not enough. And he talked about it. Like they did not hit a lot this offseason. And I do think they kind of had to get used to that again. And it showed up in week 1. I thought they were better in week 2. James talked about it. But now that the Big Ten season is here, it's almost time to turn them loose. But I think I don't know why they would have. You could kind of understand why maybe there were some communication issues and some rust in the first couple of games, because they've opened against some good teams in recent years, whether it's West Virginia or they get Auburn early, or they got to play at Wisconsin in 20. They've had to be razor sharp or close to razor sharp at the start of seasons, but this was different this year, and I do think there's something to be said for kind of getting them peaking at the right time and maybe not doing a lot early in the season, and then you focus on playing the backups. So I do think there's something to that, and I do think by the time the Oregon game rolls around, you're going to see a different attitude, and I think you're going to see a different purpose, and you're going to see a more focused team, and they're going to need to be all of that, because the highlights I saw from Oregon's game against not a great Oklahoma, it was a track meet, and he's got those guys have athletes, and it's going to be a heck of a show. But I do think I don't think Penn State's necessarily been holding back, but they just haven't been. We haven't seen their A game. I'm not sure we've seen their B game on offense yet.
I think that's true. I also, like, to James's point, to the point you just made, I asked Anthony Donko about it last week. Like, do you think there's any aspect of struggling against Nevada because it's the first time that you've hit somebody in another jersey? Like, you're in practice, you are not trying to hurt a defensive line opponent. Like, and not that they're trying to hurt somebody, but they are trying to inflict pain on like the get off on the offensive line is what I'm going at. And he said, like, yeah, we need to be better, and we know we're better, but there's absolutely a part of that. I mean, we're shaking off rust, and you definitely you made a good point, Bob. It happens in communication too, because James Franklin said the same thing today. Not always IDing the front in pass protection this week. That sometimes goes with Drew Allar as well. He needs to help with that. But I noticed just in live action on Saturday, I think there was a twist that they messed up that led to a sack, and they're also kind of shuffling lines a little bit with TJ Shanahan and Cooper Cousins in there for a little bit. They didn't play as much this week, neither one of them. I do think Coop was maybe a little banged up, but there's cohesiveness that has to happen. And I think last year was such a perfect example because they played pretty well about midway through the season, lose Anthony Donko, maybe take another week to get up, and then they just got better and better through the college football playoff. And I think the more time that they're able to spend together and get comfortable is definitely going to be a boost.
It's the Blue-White Breakdown. Bob Flounders, Max Ralph talking about reacting to James's Monday presser ahead of the Villanova Wildcats game on Saturday, 3:30 FS1 at Beaver Stadium. One of the things James talked about that I think we were going to talk about anyway: explosive plays, big plays. Their explosive play leader last season was Tyler Warren. I think I charted him with 21 of them, and those were either 20 or more yards as receptions, or any rush more than 15 yards. That's kind of what I think. Penn State's 12. I use 15. Whatever. He had 21 of them. He was clearly their best guy, and they don't have him now. We saw for the first time in the FIU game what Devontae Ross can do when he is 100%, and how he can impact a game with his speed. Not only as a receiver, but I think he can do some things in the special teams phase as well at some point. We'll see about that. But he was clearly not 100%, by the middle to late August, and they've kind of been treading lightly with him. But he was a weapon. He's going to continue to need to be a weapon. But where I'm going, though, is one of their big play guys from last year just really hasn't quite looked like himself, and it's Nick Singleton. He didn't do very much in the opener. I think his long game was six yards. I think he had 8 carries. He might have caught a couple of passes. They increased his workload against FIU. They increased Katron's workload against FIU. And eventually it paid off for Katron. He had a career high 144 yards, a career long touchdown run. I think it was 67 yards in the fourth quarter. Showcased, I think he's definitely a little bit quicker this year.
Oh yeah, he hit 19 miles an hour, Bob.
I don't know if he's going to go the distance. 67 yards last year. He probably would have just tried to gore somebody 15 yards up the field and then try and headbutt somebody like he did against Boise State. Yeah. But he is definitely feeling frisky, and that's a great sign. But I think it's pretty clear, and James talked about it, when you watch Nick Singleton run, that it's happened before. He can be tentative. He doesn't necessarily set up things well in space. There was a play, I think, to the left side where he had the ball, and he didn't really wait till the blocking kind of firmly set up. And instead of going outside where there was room eventually, he came back inside, and it was a small gain. He does look like he's pressing. I think James talked about that Monday. I think he said he had a couple of talks with Nick, and he said, you know what? You can do all these things to get ready. You can do all this training. You can work with Coach Drayton on the field. You can watch tape. But when Saturday rolls around, it's time to cut it loose. And sometimes that doesn't happen. I don't think it's necessarily happening with Nick. Max, they need to get him playing the way that he was early last season. He was really good early last season. Yeah. He had his moments. He had that long run against Boise State that kind of cemented the Fiesta Bowl win. I thought he was really good against a very good Notre Dame defense in the Orange Bowl, but it has not it has not picked. He has not picked up where he kind of left off. So I'm really curious to see moving forward what Penn State tries to do to get Nick going again and get him confident again, because he's one of their maybe their most capable player of creating an explosive play when everything's working well for him.
I think it's probably not a stretch in any way to say Nick Singleton is the best athlete on the offense. Maybe not the roster. A guy like Dennis Sutton is probably up there.
Yeah.
But Nick is probably the best athlete on the offense. Maybe for his size, you could say a guy like Luke Reynolds.
Yeah.
But Nick is, for his speed, his strength, he's unbelievable. And when you have that, he's been that way ever since high school too. He never, until he got to Penn State, had a situation where he really had to worry about hitting the right hole or recognizing a defense. He was just better. He was just more talented. He could just win however he wanted and needed to win. I talked to him this summer. I got a little one-on-one with him. If you guys didn't see that in the summer, and that was one of the things he said about Stan Drayton coming in. He's like, I'm learning a lot more about what defenses are trying to do to me. That's a huge step for him, but I do think you see it's getting to him a little bit. And one of the things that James Franklin said that makes a lot of sense to me, he said Nick Singleton is just such a good kid. He's very humble, very coachable. And that absolutely comes across in every interaction I've ever had with Nick Singleton. Very polite, very good kid. But because of his coachability, because he's always trying to do the right thing in practice and learning and everything, that carries over into game day a little bit too much. And you have him a lot like Drew Allar, just trying to make the right play instead of just playing. And that came up so much in this game specifically. I think there were 3, maybe even 4 runs for Nick Singleton that had potential to be 10 plus yards. And I think he only had 1 run of that distance. There were, you mentioned the one on the outside. I think there were 2 or 3 where he got to the edge off the line of scrimmage and had blocking from his receivers and just made the wrong cut. And I think that that's probably a coaching thing, because a lot of times in football, when you're on the perimeter, whether it's a bubble screen, whether it's a stretch run, you always say, like, press the sideline, keep widening the field, but, like, don't give up your leverage. And if Nick Singleton is fast enough to beat anybody on the edge, any corner, I'm willing to contend that. And I just think that he's not realizing that when he's in the moment in a game right now. So if they can get him right, this running attack is really scary for opposing defenses, because I do think Kaytron Allen is the best that we've seen him in his 4 years. And I think athletically, Nick Singleton is just fine. He's just got to get right in the head.
That's so I mean this as a compliment, but we're talking about Nick Singleton and probably to an extent Drew Allar probably thinking too much, thinking too hard instead of just playing. That has never been Kaytron Allen's issue, because he just plays. You know what I mean?
He does.
We asked him what he remember, how he got loose on that long touchdown run, and he just started laughing. He's like, "Man, I can't tell you how I did it," but he could recall like exactly all of the players that threw the big blocks for him, that sprung him. It was, obviously the offensive line did its part, but Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds on the perimeter, and then the 2 receivers, Pena and Hudson, came all the way across the field and kind of escorted him and kind of got in the way of some guys that were trying to chase Kaytron down. But it's really 2 different approaches. I think Kaytron's just like, give me the ball. I'm gonna go as hard as I can, and I'm gonna be decisive. Maybe 1 cut, and I'm gonna go. And if it doesn't work out, I'm just gonna try and run the guy over. He's got more to his game, but I don't think that's ever how kind of Nick really thinks about a running play. So it's 2 different styles, but they've both gone for over 3,000 yards. If they're healthy, they're both going to pass Evan Royster at some point, and it might. Kaytron actually passed Nick, and he's got a little bit of a lead, but it's such a contrast with those 2. Like you said, Nick is well spoken, very thoughtful. Kaytron's all of those things, but they're really not the same personality, and you see it out on the field.
You absolutely do. It's just, I will say, like, it's a good thing for Penn State when we're talking about how bad is not the right way of saying it, but how much better Nick Singleton could be. And we're
Yeah.
talking about a guy that has more than 3,000 rushing yards in his career. Like it's a little nitpicky, but the best version of the 2025 Penn State Nittany Lions has Nick Singleton breaking off 20, 30, 40, 50-yard gains, and it's not happening right now. It's almost sacrilegious to say that a guy could be too north and south, because there are so many times when you're just screaming at your TV saying, like, just get upfield to a running back, at all levels of football. But sometimes I think Nick Singleton can be a little too north and south. The guy's able to make people miss in a lot of different ways, and sometimes he's just not tapping into it.
All right, we're about 30 minutes in. I think we've done a pretty thorough job of looking at Penn State's offense from a lot of different angles, and also mixing in some of James Franklin's thoughts about the offensive line, how it can get better, what's kind of held them back a little bit, the approach, the offseason approach, right? Maybe not a lot of physical contact for a physical offensive line. We've looked at Nick and Katron. We've talked about Drew and how he kind of runs hot and cold, and how as good as he was, and locked in as he was against Nevada. It was the different kind of Drew against FIU. But there's just no debating his upside when he is locked in. I think we're just leaving the defense alone, because they really, really can't, other than just marvel at where Dennis Sutton is in his career. And now he literally, every game, he is not only being productive, but he's just physically just manhandling people. And don't get it twisted. Like, this isn't because of the opponents the last 2 weeks. If you look what he did in the postseason last year, he was hurting a lot of Notre Dame people. He was hurting a lot of Boise State people. He was hurting a lot of SMU people on the way to racking up outrageous stats. I wrote something on PennLive on Sunday. He is really, to me, the only player I would compare him to is a player. I wasn't covering Penn State, but he was one of my favorite players when I watched Penn State games in the 90s. Courtney Brown and he are very similar in terms of devastation and physical dominance. And I think this run is going to continue. There's going to be some offensive lines that are going to be a little bit better at maybe limiting what he can do just because of their physical skills and their depth. But if you leave Deny one-on-one against just about anyone in college football, it's not going to end well for the person that's kind of freed up to try and handle him. And so he's been great. It's been fun watching a true freshman who didn't even enroll early, the Tasmanian Devil, the jump he made since early August to now. It's scary to think about what he's going to do after an off season with Chuck Losey. When he kind of redefines his body a little bit. I thought it was interesting. I did not really realize that at one point he was a quarterback in high school, which is it says a lot maybe about his physical gifts that he can make that transition. But those are two fun players for me. I just enjoy watching this Penn State defense early. I've really enjoyed Max, Amari Campbell. I've really enjoyed Tony Rojas, a healthy Tony Rojas. All their secondary people, I think, are playing at a very high level. I don't even know if anyone has even thrown in A.J. Harris's direction yet. I mean, I don't know if he's got any stats, but I don't think they've really tried him too much. I think Zakee Wheatley, in a game that was 34-0, made some plays in that game to prevent some big plays and possibly a touchdown in that game. I really enjoyed watching Jim Knowles work with this defense and put his imprint on it. I look forward, though, to when Oregon comes to town, because Jim Knowles has seen Oregon twice already. The first look wasn't great when they lost a shootout game in the regular season, but he caught up quickly in the playoffs. So, Max, do you have any final thoughts? I just think the offense is kind of what people are talking about, so we should have talked about it. And James was only happy to talk about it. I thought he was enlightening today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to try and accomplish against an FCS team that's it's really hard to measure success against a team like that, just because they're just physically not in the same ballpark.
Yeah, absolutely true. You brought up a lot of good points. The one thing I will say on the defense, I mean, they threw a shutout, and James Franklin walks into the press conference and says, "Yeah, we could still get better." you know, I think that there's a lot of interesting things that can happen on defense. The
Yeah.
communication is an interesting thing. Zachy Wheatley did make those two huge plays. Want to make sure I highlight those again. I've done it a couple of times, but keep doing it because those did save a touchdown. Those single-handedly kept the shutout
Yeah.
intact. But the safeties are doing a lot of communication this year in Knowles' defense that they didn't really have to do last year or under Manny Diaz as well.
Mhm.
The communication from Amari Campbell. I noticed late in the second quarter that there were a few kind of awkward substitutions for the defense against FIU. There were times when FIU moved the ball just a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
That running back was good. I like
yeah,
that running back. I thought he was really good.
yeah, and quarterback made some really interesting throws, but he does present some problems with his legs and in the RPO game. So interesting stuff. They move the ball a little bit. Penn State's defense can get better. You said deny Dennis Sutton. What a player, man! I just love watching him. I think you and I pointed this out during the game, but running an RPO at deny Dennis Sutton is a horrible choice because your running back might die no matter what. The way Jim Knowles has taught RPOs right now is defensive lineman takes the running back, they'll find answers for the quarterback. And deny Dennis Sutton that has taken that to heart. I mean, he flies in there and just destroys the running back every single time. Run RPOs at him at your own risk. One thing that I saw Saturday that I think, might be going over a few people's heads, Zariah Fisher coming back is a huge thing for this defense because he made some plays early. He didn't show up in the stat sheet at all, I don't think. But opposite of denied Dennis Sutton, they need a guy who's physical in the run game. Chaz Coleman, Jalen Harvey, they've both shown that they can rush the passer a little bit.
Yeah.
They've shown that. But you said Chaz might need another offseason with Chuck Losey to take that next step. I do think that's a thing. I think in the run game, he's still a little green. He's still a little fresh. Having Zariah Fisher to be able to keep teams honest in the run game across denied Dennis Sutton, really, really important. You need a guy who has the experience, who knows what he's seeing when they run an RPO at him, a guy who's physical enough to set an edge. That is big. He played quite a few snaps. He looked healthy. They need him this year. They definitely need him this year. And if he's there, paired with those young guys who can really rush the passer, I think this edge group is going to be really, really good by the end of the season.
Yep, I totally agree, Max. I'm also starting to get a little bit excited about some of these defensive tackles who are flashing that are not starting because when they get in the game, I don't know if the other team's a little bit tired, but it's probably a topic for another podcast because we're already about 37 minutes into this bad boy. But the defense is coming together. I think fans should be excited about what's going to about not only how they're playing now, but what they're going to look like, by the middle of the season, because they're still kind of learning some things and how to play in Jim Knowles' very unique defense. So it's been fun to watch that. Thanks, guys, for listening, watching, and don't forget Max and our man Johnny McGonigal live Thursday. Predictions on Penn State, Villanova. I'm sure they'll be talking about something other than that as well. But Max, I enjoyed talking with you. We're going to have a lot of interesting stuff leading up to the Villanova game, and then it's a bye week. Although it's not really a bye week for Penn State or PennLive's Penn State writers, but we're going to do the best we can.